This is Anthony Parent, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I have a fantastic guest, a guest I met many, many years ago, a true expert in the field, somebody who has helped me out with cases and someone who's helped a lot of other attorneys and tax professionals figure out the best resolutions for when their clients get into a bunch of tax issue. The secret weapon is bankruptcy, and bankruptcy is often a thing that people don't want to talk about. But in this episode, we're going to go into how bankruptcy can really, really help solve an IRS problem. And maybe you don't even file bankruptcy, and we'll get into that more. I want to introduce my guest, the great Larry Heinkel. Larry and I met in Baltimore in 2010. He is from Tampa, and he was I saw Larry, and he was talking. I said, I need to sit next to that guy. And I was glad I did. He's somebody who truly understands the subject matter really better than anyone else. And then Larry, you're in tax resolution. You got into tax resolution before there was even an industry. Isn't that right?
Yeah, before it was the internet. Before the internet, before it was an industry. I worked at a big tax firm in Orlando, and I was the one they gave the tax problems to. And I remember my first real big one was there was a proposed assessment after an audit of about $3.5 million, and went to appeals, and I got it settled for $300,000. And I was like, wow, man, this is great. And so I did it. And I'll tell you a funny story if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love stories.
So, way back then I was doing estate planning, corporate transactions, all kinds of business and estate planning stuff, and some tax problem stuff. And I was down in Miami at the Fontainebleau Hotel, what they call the Heckerling estate planning.
Right. Yeah, I hear about that. Yeah, in January. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was sitting there in this auditorium with at least 2,000 people in there. I mean, it's gigantic. There's
right.
Lawyers, bankers, all kinds of people in there. And they're talking about grits, grats, grots, and all this kind of stuff. Very complicated. And I'm sitting there thinking, I've got the gray matter. I'm smart enough for this stuff, but there's a hell of a lot of liability and a lot of competition, and the fees aren't really good because of the competition. Or I was living in Orlando at the time. I could just do tax problems. There was like no competition. You can't screw up because you're fixing someone else's problem. The fees are better. Lunch on the second day and Tuesday, I packed up. I drove back to Orlando. And I've never looked back. And I said, I'm just going to do tax problems. I've been doing this, been a lawyer now for 41 years.
Oh my God. And I have talked about going to the Heckling conference too. I was very close to going, but you sort of talked me out of it now.
Well,
because you're absolutely right. There's so much demand. And in the tax where I notice is that in the tax advisory space, everybody wants to be in the tax advisory space right now. But it's very, what's the compelling reason why somebody needs tax advisory services right now? Not really anything. But when it comes to a tax problem, people need relief immediately, and that's where I have a lot. We've had a lot of fun picking up some great clients over the years, and then you fix them up, and then you help them out along the way. Well, so now you've been in Tampa though. Now you've moved to Tampa recently, right? You were in Atlanta
20 years ago.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
And you've had some pretty famous clients, right? You've had
yeah, I'm surprised you remember that. Did you see the movie The Englishman?
I think I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, but kind of the mafia and all that. I represented the former president of the Teamsters Union after he had gone to prison for tax evasion and extortion. He retired to Florida, and the IRS audited him, and somehow he got my name. So he was featured a lot in the Englishman, and then also the founder of USA Today. He was chairman, whatnot, of Gannett.
Yep.
Publishing and radio and TV and all that kind of stuff. And of course, he's got a big compound in Cocoa Beach, and he got audited, and so I represented him. And those are two guys that are not used to being told no. I wasn't really worried too much about being, rubbed out by the USA Today founder, but the other guy
better do a good job, right? There's some pressure.
Yeah. So, and then some famous athletes and different people like that.
Now, you know what? Actually, this is something that has happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you. But one time, I was in an IRS examination, and I was having a discussion with an examiner. It was right in the office behind us there, and she asked me. We were going through some things. She goes, "I'm just going to disallow all these expenses." I'm like, "Okay. Well, if you do that, we're just going to file bankruptcy because you're pushing it out of you're pushing this out of a realm of where my client will file. We'll do it. So if you want to do that, knock yourself out, but you're not going to see anything. It's kind of a waste of time." And then she looked at me. She goes, "You can't file bankruptcy to get rid of tax debts." And I'm like, what? And so I went and then grabbed my handbook, the purple book, the one that dealing with your solving tax problems, the purple tube. Yeah. So I pulled that one out and I opened up the page. I'm like, so they have a whole chapter on bankruptcy here. Why do you think that is? So she's like, she goes, "I really didn't know." She goes, "I had no idea." And I've had CPAs call me and say, "Why'd you tell my client he could file bankruptcy to get rid of his tax debt?" I'm like, "Because he could file bankruptcy to get rid of his tax debt." She goes, "No, he can't." And what are you doing? What kind of nonsense you're giving? No, so do you encounter the same thing when people say, "What are you talking about?" But you can't use bankruptcy. It's offering compromise. That's all it is.
Yeah, way back when I was a young lawyer and doing this work, someone in big tax debt, all we did was, well, back then they really weren't doing offers and compromises either. That was a waste of time. If you remember, back in the 80s, maybe early 90s. So all you would do is have a big, installment agreement and wait out the statute of limitations. And I was at a bankruptcy seminar where somebody from IRS District Council that did bankruptcy came to speak. And I had, oh no, that was another one. Let me back up earlier. The Florida Bar, I was a young lawyer. I wanted to get on the speaking circuit because, again, before the internet, that's how you kind of got to be known and get referrals. So I got an invitation from the Florida Bar to give a presentation on taxes and bankruptcy. And I said, sure. I had no knowledge, knew nothing, but I wanted to have the opportunity to speak. I spent about 200 hours reading about bankruptcy to learn bankruptcy. I had taken one bankruptcy course in law school, but I don't know that I really paid attention much. I was one of the guys that would get an A, no worse than a B, without a lot of studying, just because nerd or whatever. But I wasn't going to do bankruptcy. I was going to be a tax lawyer, by God. So I didn't really pay attention. So I spent literally a couple hundred hours learning bankruptcy and then putting together an outline. And the thing that's interesting about discharging taxes in bankruptcy, most bankruptcy lawyers, with all due respect, they don't know anything about tax. And most tax people don't know anything about bankruptcy. And you got to put the two together in order to make it work. And so that's how I got into this. And it's been a gold mine. Then at this seminar for bankruptcy lawyers where the IRS attorney was speaking, he was talking about unfiled returns. Now, some of this changed by the 2005 bankruptcy, BAP-CPA, the 2005 change in law. But you could put unfiled returns and discharge them. I think it was called a super discharge. Man, my life, because I get a lot of discharges, a lot of non-filers. And we would prepare the returns, and then we'd go into a Chapter 13 and get a super discharge. It was huge. And then the BAP-CPA changed that where it's, you can't quite do it the same way.
You can't do that anymore. Well, maybe we should talk about this right now.
You got to file the returns and then wait a little bit of time.
Right. And that's generally the rules with bankruptcy. So it's not something you can do right now. So there's you have to be filed, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then a certain amount of time has to go. And after you're audited, a certain amount of time has to go. Do you want to just throw out the general rules right now so people kind of understand what they are? Yeah.
The audience is going to write this down. The five main tests is that you filed a return, that you actually filed the return. That is, the debt is an income tax. It's not a trust fund recovery plan. It's an income tax. You filed that return more than 2 years before the bankruptcy, and the due date for the return was more than 3 years before the bankruptcy. And that if there was a later assessment, the later assessment's been at least 241 days. So there's a 241-day test. There's a 3-year due date test and a 2-year filed test, and no fraud or willful evasion. So if you meet those tests, then it's non-priority.
Right. And now this is the thing when and I think people lose what we mean by discharge. What do we mean when your tax debts are discharged?
What it means is that if it means it's non-priority, so in a 7, it gets wiped out like credit cards. And in a 13, it's wiped out like credit cards also. And if it's not dischargeable, or it's priority, it survives a Chapter 7, like alimony and child support. And in a 13, it's got to be paid back within the 5-year plan. So if you have a debt that is priority, most of them, if it's priority because of the 2-year, the 3-year, well, then what you do is you just wait until it's non-priority, then file the bankruptcy. And here's where the bankruptcy lawyers can make more money. You charge them a fee to work out a payment agreement until they can file bankruptcy. So you get
right, exactly, right.
Yes, you get the charge your client. And here's the other secret about doing tax problem work compared to bankruptcy work. Bankruptcy clients are broke.
Correct.
Tax problem clients have money.
Oh, good point. Yeah, by the way, Larry is a real innovator, and I just got to mention this too. He has a taxdischargedeterminator.com. This is a product you have here, Larry. He's been innovating, and he's been helping other professionals. He has a great network of bankruptcy attorneys around the country. He's helping them all get really, really good results for their clients. Really good results. Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about Tax Discharge Determinator?
Sure. Going back, let's say 15 years ago, I was at my in-laws' house for Thanksgiving. And back in the day, it was a cold and rainy day, as they tend to have up there. You would have to get the transcripts, the account, and these are account transcripts. They're not return transcripts. It's an account transcript. And then you would write down on the piece of paper, okay, here's the date that the return was filed, and you would project out 2 years. And then here's when it was due, and you project out 3 years, and when it was assessed in 241 days, and you project, okay, what's the last of those to occur? One thing I didn't mention is there are some tolling events. I know you don't want to get too technical, but very important. While you're waiting for that 3 years or that 2-year period, one enterprising attorney way back when, his client was named Young, he said, well, while we're waiting for that to go, we're going to put him in a Chapter 13 because, as you know, with the automatic stay, they can't touch my client. And we'll wait for that 3 years to click by. Then we'll dismiss out of 13 or convert to a 7. Boom, we're done. And the Supreme Court said in the Young decision, not so fast, or as we know from law school, bullshit. It's a legal term. Can I say that on the internet?
I think it's out there. I think it's already out there. Yeah.
So I can say it. So there's called tolling, equitable tolling. The Supreme Court said, very fairly, it's not fair to the IRS that these time periods are clicking away and they can't touch it. So they came out with, and it was codified in the 2005 Act, okay, there's going to be tolling during that. So if before those 3, 2, etc. periods are satisfied, if before they're satisfied, you file a bankruptcy or a timely CDP request, then we're going to toll those periods for the entire time you're in the bankruptcy or in the CDP plus 90 days. Okay. So when I was at my in-laws' house on this piece of paper and I got those periods, and then I go, oh, wait a minute, there was a CDP from this date to this date. Turn off my phone.
Yeah, you're a wanted man.
Yeah, you'd have to find this start date, this end date, plus 91 days, tack it on, boom, boom, boom. And while I'm doing this, I was thinking, what is my mind doing? My mind, this is just a computer algorithm. And so I started mapping this out into, I think you call it a decision tree, boom, boom. And it was bringing back my algebra, because if that tolling event, let's say you filed bankruptcy in April 1, the due date's not at April 15, do you count that time? The answer is no. So it would be this point to this point plus this to this, except for this to this. The mind's blown. But I finally figured it all out, and I hired a computer program to put it into, I think it was C++. And I probably tested it hundreds of times with all the variables, so that if you change this one, and I would do it by hand, then I'd plug it into my program and make sure it came out with the same answer. I literally probably have 1,000 hours into developing this program, literally, because it's got to work every single time under every single variable, and it worked. And then I hired a web designer to do the website and the back end, and it's been out for probably about 10 years now. And there's probably, I haven't checked in a while, well over 2,000 people around the country that have registered to use it. Some people use it a lot, some people use it once in a while, but it will give you the exact answer in minutes, rather than it used to take me, and I knew the ins and outs, it would take me an hour by hand. And now,
right, where a mistake could be made too, and and we don't want that, right? I mean, this is critical to get the dates right. Yeah,
it doesn't work. And then I have some people tell me, "Well, I know the rules." Well, then great. This wasn't designed for you, or you might want to just do a double check, like you said, to make sure you didn't make a mistake.
Right, because once you file, that's a horrible. That's a horrible. When you have a client come in and they're like, they just filed bankruptcy, it's like, if you just waited a year, you could have discharged all your debt. Okay, now, and that happens. And this is the thing I got to say, Larry. This is why I love you, because most people, when the discussion of bankruptcy comes around, people put their heads down and it's like, people like it. But you fully embrace this tool, because you have such a positivity about it. That's kind of inspiring, to tell you the truth, that you're like, hey, let's use the tools that you're allowed to all the way. And that's what I love how you do. You're like, I'm not looking at it as a bad thing. This is just a tool. This is a tool for my clients to get the best deal, whatever it is.
So I got on one thing you just said. I had in Orlando, one of the guys that we're friendly, bankruptcy guy. I won't say we're tight friends. He did the bankruptcy, and there was $70,000 that survived. So he referred it to me, and I'm looking at the guy's options, and I realized that the bankruptcy attorney made a mistake, and he filed 4 weeks too early. And so, in giving my duty is to my client, I gave him all his options, and one of which was you could sue the guy for malpractice, because he had emails back and forth saying the only reason I'm filing bankruptcy is to get rid of this tax debt. He got rid of a lot, but there was 70,000 they filed 4 weeks too early. So,
there's a good point. Yeah, lower your malpractice rates. Get tested, tax discharge determinator if you're doing bankruptcy. I mean, that is. God, that's a loser for everybody. Everybody lost on that one, right?
All we did was we wrote a couple of demand letters to the insurance company, and after 2 letters and 1 brief phone call with the carrier, they wrote a check for $70,000.
Larry, you're.
I took a little
fantastic work
piece of that.
Of course, but I mean, this is look, this is what I would say, and I mean, you've gone to a lot of tax presentations around the country, and when you're room about 200 people, and what percentage of that room is going to be someone who understands it at the very highest level? And I found it's about 3%, 3 to 5% of the room really understands it. And that's, I think, the thing that people need to understand. I'm sorry, but most people in tax resolution, I don't know if they really should be in it, because if you're not looking at bankruptcy, if you don't understand those rules, if you don't know it can be an option, you're not giving all the tools to your client to make the best informed decision. And the other thing I like about bankruptcy is because when you're dealing with the IRS, it's the IRS. But when you're dealing with bankruptcy, it is a bankruptcy judge, and the IRS is just another creditor, right?
The creditor. And you know, Anthony, one of the things that people will say is, well, I don't want to ruin my credit. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Right now, you owe the IRS $250,000. You owe the state of Illinois another $60,000, and you got credit card debt. You don't have good credit now.
Yeah.
So if we get rid of, because the other benefit of bankruptcy over an offer in compromise is a couple of reasons why, if you qualify, an offer in compromise, you're on 5-year probation. You got to go 5 years, file on time, pay in full. Most of these clients have never done that. Okay, number one, an offer in compromise, you may default. Number two, the bankruptcy is going to get rid of your state taxes too. And what's that?
That's a great point. In a state like California, that's pretty important. I mean, they're getting a little crazy there, you know?
Now, California they do have, I don't want to get into the weeds unless you want to. They got a little weird test to get rid of it. But for most of the states, if you filed the same time as the IRS and everything kind of mirrors the IRS, then you're going to get rid of your state tax, and you're going to get rid of your credit card and your judgments and all that kind of stuff, which you're not with the offer in compromise. And so I tell people, because a lot of my clients are making $100,000, and they're worried about their credit. I said, listen, after bankruptcy, you don't owe anybody. You can't file bankruptcy again for another 8 years, and you're making $100,000. You're a much better credit risk after bankruptcy than before.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. That is a big point. I want to ask a couple questions that's specific about bankruptcy, and you have a lot of people who make high income. And you know, this is what I always say is like, look, if you're dead broke, solving your tax problem is not the hardest thing in the world. And when we go, like, most of the people in that room can solve the most basic tax problem. But when you start getting people with actually higher income and assets, oh boy, it gets a little trickier. So is that, and tell me how some of the tools that you use for, say, you know, somebody who's making, you know, $500,000 a year, but might have, you know, $2 million in debt and some equity here and there.
In those cases, there are some rules where they probably aren't going to be able to do a Chapter 7. They might be forced into a Chapter 13 or 11.
Okay.
And then I do get people that say, well, you know, I've got a vacation home and I've got this and that. And it's like, you know what? The only reason you've got that vacation home and a lot of equity is because you didn't pay your taxes. So cry me a river. I don't feel too bad for you. You know, you're not. Remember law school? I always said that you can get out of law school pretty easy if you can just remember the reasonable man standard, and that the law favors the widows and the orphans. You know? In tenant law, you know, if you're a widow or an orphan, the law favors you. Or, you know, if you're a tenant, an orphan, or a widow, the law favors you. Most of our guys, and I don't want to get in trouble saying this, but it's a fact. Most of our clients are white males. Okay.
Yep, that's right.
And I'll tell you why is I think that there's some, I probably shouldn't say this. I'm going to.
Oh, please. Oh, no, that's going to get interesting. I got to hear this. Keep going.
This is really one of the most viewed videos of all time. Women tend to not get in trouble. Women do what they're supposed to do. I don't know if there's a chromosome or a missing chromosome, because I always forget if we have the X or the Y's. But women, there's rare exceptions. But I would never advertise in a medium that attracts women. They don't have tax problems.
They do the right thing.
They do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
The men are the ones that make mistakes and put it aside, and they'll fix it later.
That's right.
And
you got more important things to get to, right? You know, that's the thing.
So I advertise on sports talk radio and things like that attract men, because they're the ones that mess up. And minorities tend to not have a lot of tax problems, because in most of our in our country, to get into trouble with the IRS, you need to either be a small business owner or a 1099. Okay, most of our businesses are owned again by white males.
Yep.
And the ones that are owned by the women like, they're going to do what they need to do. The exception being real estate agents. A lot of women are in real estate.
Thank you. That's the one, right? Yeah, that actually is the one.
They're good. They're going to get in trouble because
They actually, yeah, that was one of my first clients. That was when she was tracked down by a revenue officer who showed up at a Rotary Club meeting. So she stopped by. So she stopped by very quickly after to say, "Okay, that was scary. What's going on here?" I think that's absolutely valuable. That's incredible insight. That's absolutely true, right? That's completely my experience on this.
It's not racist. It's not chauvinistic. It's
what it is. Right. Well, the other thing too is that the IRS, for a lot of and I'm pretty sure you know this, but the IRS has a hard time auditing certain types of people. Like Chinese people aren't audited because they don't understand the books. So Chinese restaurants really aren't audited because they don't get it. So they just sort of they get a free pass. But if you have a pizza place, maybe you have a bigger chance.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the Asians, not just Chinese, but the Asians. They have this tradition that they give each other money. First of all, they don't like bank accounts. They deal in cash, and they will give this cousin or this neighbor or whatever money, and it's a loan. They don't document, and I haven't had a lot of that, but it's hard to trace down what they do with their money, and that they tend to help others of the same culture in their businesses, and so it's really kind of strange.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I shouldn't say strange. It's normal in their culture. Very strange in our culture.
Yeah.
I'm going to get sued now. I can tell.
No, I think you're cold telling like it is. Well, you're close to maybe retiring, so maybe hey, this is it. I'll get Larry's farewell tour. I'm going to tell it like it is.
Actually, my 66th birthday is Tuesday, and I do want to slow down. It used to be that you would keep these trade secrets close to the vest because you didn't want to help your competition. And you know what? I've made plenty of money. I'm going to make more money. There's more business out there. You and I are friendly competitors.
Right?
Yep. We go after the same market. But you and I know there's plenty of business.
Oh my, it's so huge. There's and all I want is what I would want is just make sure that there's good practitioners, ones like you. Like that's all I want. I want people to go to someone who's good. If it's me, great, but just go to someone good. Yeah. And you're really at the top level, and exactly. And that's why. And I think that when you understand the reality of that room when you're there, there's really only 3 to 4% of the people who kind of get it. Those rest of the people who, if you don't help them, they'll just make your problem worse. They're making the whole industry stink. They're giving the entire industry a black eye. So the more help that we could give to everybody, and really, I think it's just the right thing to do. For whatever reason, God did bless us with a bit of talent, I would say, and I think it's up to us to share that wealth. And Larry, over the years, you have been so helpful to so many people, and given that optimism, like, no, this can be done. I'm not going to give up. I'm not just going to accept the fact that maybe this is a question I want to ask you. Why do you care so much? Most people don't care, but you care so much. Yeah. You wanted to learn this, and don't tell me it's about the money, because it's not. It's something else.
No, that's a good question. If you do a good job and you help other people, you'll make plenty of money.
Yeah.
And we talked the other day. We were talking about ERC. We did really good quality work, but I'm definitely waiting for the IRS to start cutting checks again, because we made enough to retire on.
Right. That's awesome.
But what the hell am I going to do? I do enjoy playing golf, and I do enjoy helping people and helping other practitioners. Anthony, you live in Connecticut, right?
That's right.
And do you remember years ago you were thinking? I hope I'm not speaking out of school. You were thinking about moving to Florida.
I took the Florida bar.
Yeah.
In fact.
And what was my advice to you?
You said you're right next to New York. Why are you wasting your time?
Yeah. Now, this was before we started advertising more and working remotely and all that. So I don't know if I would have given you the same advice that I gave you whenever there was 5, 6, 7 years ago. But you were thinking about moving to Florida. And I said, you know, why would you come to Florida where there's a couple guys like me that are kind of big players, you know, volume-wise. We do a lot. I said, you know, because in Orlando, I think the state of Florida has about 22 million people. Okay. And Orlando's got, greater Orlando, Central Florida's probably got, you know, 3 or 4 million easily. And then I moved to Tampa Bay 20 years ago, and there's another 5 million here. So if all I do is go after that Central Florida, Tampa Bay, what they call the I-4 corridor, we joked about how that's the same area that sort of decides the presidential elections, you know, that I-4 corridor. Why would you do that when you're in Connecticut and your Long Island has a population of train, because we were talking about how you kind of tended to have to meet people in person back then.
Okay. Yeah, back then, and that was the thing. And back then, I would go down to. I had an office down in Manhattan that I would go to.
And I was saying,
because I took your advice. That's what it was. It's like,
and
I said, you know what, Larry's right. I said, why am I? There's no need for that, because and up here, and I think what happens in we have a lot of attorneys up here, and a lot of CPAs, but no one is focusing on those hard issues. No one wants to do the hard work. And for me, the harder work is kind of fun and easy, and I enjoy it. So I'm like, well, I'm actually in a great spot. And I actually have realized, but we're also doing a lot of now with Zoom. We do a lot of our international stuff. So, you know, we're talking to clients from all over the world. We're doing a lot of that, you know, the offshore resolution work.
People face to face.
Yeah, I know.
Why are you coming to Florida? Stay in Manhattan and Long Island. You've got so many people.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're absolutely. Yeah. No, and I picked up.
Whatever that market is, if you got 10% of it, there's more work than you can handle.
I picked up some really fun clients in New York too. I found I had some wonderful clients, really, really interesting. And, you know, we tried out some certain things. I'll tell you one little quick one. A guy came in, he's like, hey, I got something to tell you. He's like, what's that? So the IRS is coming after me for money I owe. I'm like, okay. It's like, I didn't really file my taxes. I'm like, why is that? It's like, well, because I sell gray market AIDS medication, and it might be black market. I said, okay. And he's like, well, this is what I do. I just go buy, I go on the street, pay cash for a whole bunch of AIDS medications. I upcharge them, and then I sell them. And he goes, what, these end up, you know, this ends up for people who don't have health insurance. I'm doing okay selling it. So I'm like, okay, all right. So I'm like, all right, let me see if I can help you out. And so we ended up filing returns, and we just sort of, we used BizStats to create his tax return. And so he had a bill and paid it. And he's like, okay, that's it. I'm going to get out of this market now too. He's a little bit too nervous about it. But that was just such a fun client to say, wow, that's an interesting way to make some money. Let's get you to tax compliance. That was a lot of fun. So I guess I can thank you for that great client. So questions I have is, let's talk about one of the things. We are getting into the weeds a little bit, and because we want to talk about some of the technical things. We have a lot of tax pros who do watch this channel, so I think a lot of them are going to appreciate it.
A lot of who to watch?
A lot of tax professionals watch us here.
Oh, okay.
So feel free to dig in deep, and our audience tends to be incredibly brilliant. By the way, they really are smart people. They kind of intimidate me sometimes. So a substitute for return. This is the rule. Like, you need to file your return yourself. At the IRS, when you don't file one, the IRS creates one for you. Doesn't do any favors, but they take all the third-party reporting to say, hey, here's your tax return we prepared for you. Do you agree with it? If not, if you don't respond to us in 30 days, we're going to say this is what you owe. Those are the types of things that you can never file in bankruptcy, or is there some sort of exception?
Well, here's the thing. You know, we were talking, whatever it was, 15, 20 minutes ago. And by the way, I'm going to take a little sidestep here. How long have you been doing your podcasts?
2000. Well, this podcast, I would say, I don't know, so 2014, 15, something like that.
So 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. Yeah. This is the first podcast I've ever done. And I will tell you, I'm having
this is an honor.
Well, you know what? You're an intelligent guy. You're a fun guy. kind of like a mushroom.
A younger version of yourself?
Yeah. I don't know if you got
Slightly,
that joke.
slightly.
A fun guy, you're a mushroom, you're a fun guy. Anyway, and so I've got about 7 people working for me that do most of the work. I handle personally the more complex cases. I won't talk in school. I've got a guy that been running a business. You know what FET is? The federal excise tax on airplanes. So owes about $6 million. So I'm handling that particular case and what we're going to do and all that. But this has been a lot of fun. So let's go back to what you said about the substitute of return. Remember when I said 15, 20 minutes ago, here's the 5 tests that you need to meet. You had to file a return. It's got to be an income tax, blah, blah, blah. So you have to file an actual return. And one of the tests is that, as you mentioned under section 6020B, if you don't file a return, the IRS can prepare one for you. It's a substitute of return. That's not dischargeable. Getting into the weeds, it's not dischargeable, but what happens if you later come back and file an actual return? Is that a return that starts the 2-year clock so that you can file a bankruptcy? Yes, it is. It does start the return. It starts the 2-year clock. If you file a bankruptcy and it's been more than 2 years, there's an issue of whether it was a bona fide return. Under the Beard test, is it a real return? Beard, B-E-A-R-D. And if it was a bona fide attempt, under penalties of perjury, blah, 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 it can be an actual return. So if you file bankruptcy and you have an SFR, because here's how the process works, Anthony. Let's say it's now we're in February now, and so you didn't file a return, and so the IRS are going to start the SFR process. They have to send you a notice. They send you a notice of deficiency, etc. And we're in February. It might be October before they finish the process. If you file your actual return before the IRS finishes that process, they will accept it as a bona fide return and start the clock. If they finish the SFR process before you file a return, and then you later come in and file a return, the IRS is going to say, and most of the courts are going to say, it's too late. It serves no purpose, and so therefore it won't be treated. Now, the IRS issued, the Department of Justice has issued a memo, and I don't have the memo offhand, but if you go to the taxdischargedeterminator.com website, and I don't say this as a plug, but I did put a bunch of information in there, okay? And somewhere in there, it'll give you the general counsel's.
I'll get that up. I'll get that up on the screen here so people can see that. Hang on one second.
It will give you the actual site. I'm gonna take my sweater off. I live in Florida.
Yeah, there you go. Right. What do you do with the sweater?
It starts to get pretty warm in Florida.
Let me get my screen share here. Okay, so here we go. All right, so here it is. Look at this valuable information. Where would I find this here? So
yeah, so that's the website. And you see my logo up there in the top left there, the T, and it's kind of like a sale TDD.
Yeah.
When I first started this, the logo that I came up with was a modified Rubik's Cube.
Oh, yeah?
Because I liked it because my theory was, like Rubik's Cube, everybody knows it can be solved, but nobody knows how to do it. With the same with the taxes. that most bankruptcy attorneys had heard rumors that you could discharge taxes, but nobody really knew how to do it. It was really difficult. And so I used this Rubik's Cube with a TDD, and you could, that was.
It is, yeah, and I honestly, it was, I knew of bankruptcy to solve problems, and I certainly sent some people, before I met you, I certainly sent people out to file get bankruptcy filed. But you were the one who, understood bankruptcy far better than anyone I encountered, and really had it applying in unique situations that I didn't think were possible. And that, again, just surprising, wonderful results, because oftentimes, with the IRS, you're stuck with, you're really stuck with what they're going to give you for your allowable expenses, which are just not based in reality for high income earners. There's no way that somebody could actually live like that. So you're in this position where, like, okay, we're going to give you we're going to give you the IRS is going to give you a repayment that you can't afford. Either you're going to stop paying that, or you're not going to make your current payments. Either way, you default, you're back in it again. And where bankruptcy, it opens up how much you can keep, what you can. That's what I really, really like about it. How long they're going to go for it. And actually, here's another thing too. Larry, what's the process? Because, and honestly, I know, with waiting 2 years, you have to wait to 2 years anyway. But, one of the issues that we have right now is with offering compromises. They're taking forever to process them. So is a bankruptcy court slowed down, or is it still the same?
It is slowed down. But I want to finish my thought on this. That
sure.
When I had this logo that looked like Rubik's Cube, and I really thought it was a cute, logo, and the message being, that it's, but most people don't know how to do it, and it's just like solving Rubik's Cube. I got a cease and desist letter from the lawyers for Rubik's Cube. And it was out of London, and I was thinking, surely I could win this case, because surely nobody is going to confuse, is this Rubik's Cube, the toy, or is this TDD, and I said, but I don't have the money to fight Rubik's Cube. So I changed it and I went to this.
But I love it. Well, I look at it as just sales taking you away. You're sailing away from your tax issue. So I have I don't know if it updated. I thought I'm sharing my screen here. Why are we not picking up? Are you not?
I see.
I did click to the FAQ, but the screen share doesn't seem to be showing it. Because you do have. So I would just say, I don't know why it's not updating. Hold on, let me see why it's not.
So the process that I was talking about here is, let's see, transcripts, pricing.
If you go to the FAQ is where I think is what you're trying to get us to, because that's where I'm seeing a bunch of great questions on here.
Yeah, there's a bunch of so going back to explaining how the SFR process works. Once they start the process in February, the IRS calls it a substitute for return. Even if in July you file an actual return and starts the clock. So it's what I call a dischargeable SFR. So what I tell people, and I don't know how much time you've got, I could go on and on with this forever, but
I think we might do, we might want to do some advanced, because we could spend hours on chapter 13. We could spend hours on 11. So I think a great overview of some of the top issues, when I think we're hitting them. So let's keep it to that, and then we'll follow up, and people want to comment. Yeah, go ahead.
I tell people, when you file the bankruptcy, do not file an adversary proceeding. Do not. And the reason is, when you file an adversary proceeding, which is a lawsuit against the government saying, hey, these taxes are dischargeable, the problem with that is it's going to be answered by the Department of Justice. And you're going to have some bright, young DOJ attorney who doesn't have a budget, and they're going to look at this. If you don't file an adversary proceeding, it'll be handled by the insolvency unit, which I think is in Cleveland or Cincinnati or something like this. And they're just going to look at the transcripts. Do you meet the 2-year rule, the 3-year rule, the 200? And they're going to check the boxes and say, okay, it's dischargeable. If you go file the adversary proceeding, you're going to have this bright young DOJ attorney who did not take the job to check boxes. I mean, if I could redo my life, when I got out of my LLM program, I would have gone to DOJ, because I think it's a 4-year commitment. You don't make a lot of money, but you're single, you don't have kids yet, you can live in DC and all that kind of stuff. And they're going to fly you all around the country to try cases and take depositions and all that kind of stuff. And invariably, remember I mentioned earlier in our talk how your debtor clients are broke, but your tax clients have a lot of money.
Right.
They make a lot of money. They send their kids to private school. They belong to country clubs. They drive a nice car, all of which, if you litigate this, can be viewed as an invasion, because you didn't have to send your kids to private school. You didn't have to belong to the country club. You could have diverted all that money to paying your taxes.
That's true.
And there's cases that I have watched in trial in Orlando where the guys got their tax debts not discharged because it was willful evasion, not to the level of going to jail, which
Right.
is clear and is the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, but clear and convincing evidence that makes it non-dischargeable because they led a regular life, if you will, of playing golf and sending the kids to Catholic school, whatever, when they had this tax debt. And so they could not discharge their taxes. So if you don't file an adversary proceeding and you let the insolvency unit look at it, they're going to be more of a check the box and agree that it's dischargeable. And if they think that it might not be because of willful evasion or fraud, they will deny it. You can reopen the bankruptcy case and now file your adversary. I've only had, in my 40-year career, I've only had 2 cases that the insolvency unit said, no, we're not going to discharge this. And we reopened, and the government was right. There was fraud on my client, and we settled it for 50%.
Larry, how would you get to settle it for 50% without the tool of bankruptcy, though? Were you think you would have gotten that result without it?
No. So
I mean, you just saved a client. Like, well, okay, you didn't get the win you wanted to, but you got the win.
Yeah. So once they start that process in February, in my example, it becomes a substitute for return on the transcripts. And so I've had many cases where there's one guy that I got to follow up on because I did this for him. I did it on a contingency and I got a $7,500 fee, but he hadn't paid me yet, which is part of the risk of a contingency. But he had filed bankruptcy somewhere in Ohio or whatever, and the IRS is saying, well, it's not dischargeable because it's an SFR. And I got involved, got a power of attorney, called the insolvency unit, showed them that, yes, the transcripts say substitute for return, but the return was filed before the SFR assessment was made. Therefore, it's an actual return. It satisfies the return definition, even the IRS, blah, blah, blah. And so they wiped it off the books, and the guy hadn't paid me yet. The other issue that comes up is the 1 day late, or the McCoy rule.
Okay.
And you've heard of that, Anthony?
No, the McCoy rule, the one, no.
Okay, the McCoy rule is there's a McCoy case out of the Fifth Circuit, McCoy versus Mississippi Department of Revenue, where they said that you filed it late, and even if it's just 1 day late, it doesn't satisfy the definition of a return because the return's supposed to be filed on time and all this. It's a nonsense. I cannot believe the Fifth Circuit, and since the First Circuit and the 10th Circuit agree. And basically it says if you file the return 1 day late, it doesn't satisfy the definition of a return, so therefore it's not dischargeable because you didn't file a return. Even the IRS does not follow that. And there's a general counsel opinion on that. So the only way that you're going to lose due to the 1 day late, what they call the McCoy rule, is against state departments of revenue. So in Florida, we don't have an income tax and a lot of sunshine. I gave a presentation to the either the Atlanta Bankruptcy Association or the Georgia Bankruptcy Association, whatever. And there was a lady in the audience, real nice lady from the Georgia Department of Revenue. And she said, yes, we are following the McCoy rule until someone tells us otherwise. Okay.
Wow.
So anyway.
So now the question now this, we're going to wrap up, and this is the question I want to ask you because I think about this sometimes. So let's say that so the McCoy rule is operative in would you say the 11th Circuit?
No, the 5th, 1st, and 10th.
Okay, 5th, 1st, and 10th. So what happens if you lived in Massachusetts? Let's say Massachusetts is in the 1st Circuit, and then you decided to say, you know what, I'm going to move to California, 9th Circuit. What rules get applied when you file bankruptcy? When you file in
where you live?
Wow! So there could be a real benefit to moving if you're not in
if you're
not in a great jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Hey,
a big state tax, and you move and you're living in Louisiana, and you move to Florida, that's a better place to file bankruptcy, as OJ learned.
All right. Yeah. So in Florida, the McCoy rule doesn't apply. You're in the 11th Circuit there, right? So, wow. Oh, man, that is, this is, I really enjoy doing this today, Larry, because you have so many nuggets of incredible information that make all the difference in the world between winning and losing. All these little, we have got a bankruptcy paralegal from San Jose joining us. Hey, thank you, Ransom. Thank you here joining us today. So right on. Thank you for joining us. Any questions? Other questions? You guys, a question? My limit is, here's a question. This is the common thing. My understanding is the limit 3 years. That is, income taxes that are over 3 years old are dischargeable as long as they were filed 3 years ago. That's the general rule. So thanks for checking in with us.
That is not necessarily true.
Oh,
because remember the tolling rules. So they may have filed so over 3 years old, yes, but there may have been some tolling. There may have been an intervening offer in compromise or bankruptcy or CDP that has to be considered. You know what? Consider. So I wasn't plugging my program, but I will.
Yeah, but I think we got to plug it again though, because hey, it calls for it.
But the reason you need this, you can do it by hand, but it takes, and you may make mistakes, you may not know all the rules. If you get, all you need is the account transcript, and you go in here and register, and when you register, you get to use it twice for free to see if you like it. After that, what most people do is they buy 10 of them, 10 sessions, because you have to use it once for every tax year. And if you buy 10 sessions, it's $300, a little less than that, $30 a session. They do not expire. You put it on a credit card, so you might use 3 for one client, and then a year later you might, use it 2 more times. They don't expire, and it's only $30. And so each time you do it, you get the account transcript, and you go in and you start a session. And what I do is I name it after my taxpayer. So it might be, say the guy's name is Ben Johnson. I'll put Johnson, Ben, 2015, if that's the year I'm doing. And then the next one might be Johnson, Ben, 2016. And so you go in and it'll ask you some questions. Look for a code 150. What's the date? You just put it in there. Look for a code 320. There isn't one? You skip it. It'll ask you to look for some codes, and you put in the dates, and then it'll spit out the answer. And it'll say, okay, this is the first date that tax year becomes dischargeable.
Oh, and hey, we got to. We're nearly out of time, but this is a great question because it always comes up too, because liens. tax liens show up in bankruptcy. So does the IRS have to release the lien after discharge? If so, what happens here?
Legally, they do not, but the insolvency unit typically does. However, the lien does stay. If they don't release it, all they can get is exempt and abandoned property. They can't go after post-petition earnings or inheritances or whatever. All they can only get now. What I do, again, remember I said don't file an adversary proceeding. You call the insolvency unit. The phone number is on the website there somewhere. And you say, are you going to be discharging the lien? And they typically do. I think what happens is the computer shows that the balance is zero and they release the lien. But if they don't, because there's equity in some exempt or abandoned property, negotiate with the insolvency unit to buy out that lien for 10 or 15% of the amount.
Oh my God! Now that is a tip and a half.
So
you were full of the gems.
Yeah, so I had a client that had well over 100 grand equity in his home, and there was a lien filed, and they would release it for $15,000, and he didn't have the money.
Oh my God!
I had another one. This was a small dollar one, but the insolvency unit or whoever was working in San Juan said the guy had a $10,000 IRA, and they wanted him to liquidate it and give the IRS money because the lien does attach to the IRA. And we said in our best Spanish, no, as a joke. And so then I said, however, my client will give you $1,000 if you release the lien. So she talked to her manager and said, okay, we'll do that. So we gave him $1,000 of post-petition money, and they released the lien, and he kept his IRA. If one has,
you're like Larry. You're seriously, you're a superhero. I gotta say here. Question: was that through an OIC?
No, it was not. It was dealing with the insolvency unit.
Just negotiation for the insolvency unit.
Yep.
Wow. Oh my, I am so glad we did this, Larry. I'm so glad to reconnect with you and to go over this.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. So let's see what we get for comments here. And so if you are experiencing a difficult tax problem, you're a higher income earner, and you are looking for some help, reach out to Larry, taxproblemsolver.com. He can help you out. And if you are a tax professional, if you are an attorney or a paralegal, check out Tax Discharge Determinator. I did get the screen up, by the way. Here's all the FAQs. I mean, these are fantastic questions that you're answering. I mean, this is just, you're giving away these great answers for free here. And also, you do still have the listserv, right? Do you still have the listserv?
Yes.
So if you want to join a listserv, this is a great resource. If you're looking for, if you're a professional, you're looking for a professional in another jurisdiction, or you're looking to get referrals, join here. Larry's created a great network of some of the best bankruptcy attorneys around the country. So this is a great thing to be a part of, and really a great community. Larry, we got to go now, but I just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I think you show such a great example of going that extra distance to find results no one else can, or very few can. And then you're generous enough with your success to share it all with us and making the world a better place. So Larry.
Well, thank you. That's very nice to say, Anthony. I appreciate it. It's high praise from you. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Larry. All right. Well, let's see if we got any more comments. We might have more comments. I don't know if we have time to get to them. Yeah, we're getting a lot. Wow, we're getting a lot of thanks, Larry. Quick question. How are Creekmore and McCoy similar?
Well, McCoy is the 1 day late rule. I know Mary, and the Creekmore was out of Denver, and I think, Mary, I just haven't looked at that in a long time, so I can't answer. Creekmore had to do with the two-year rule, I think. So I just don't recall the facts of Creekmore. I do remember the name because I used it in my research for this program. So I'm sorry, Mary. People can reach out, Larry at Tax Problem Solver, if they have more questions, or info@taxdischargedeterminator.com.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Larry. All right, guys. Thanks. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Great questions, great participation. Thanks so much. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic. Thanks for watching.